Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Deltarune video in the 12 Days of Deltarune. This is going to be an extremely micro theory. This is something I've talked about a little bit, like in my Chapter 2 streams from like a year ago I talked about this. I do not think this is true, but I do think it's kind of interesting to think about, which is essentially color theory. Both in terms of actually trying to pull something from it and maybe how Toby's thought process was going when designing these characters. Because, to be fair, before I played Homestuck, or played, well, there is some playable segments, but before I read Homestuck to the end, I would not have put as much stock into this as I do now, just because of the whole class specting thing, and like color were very important, and aspects and of your character, and yeah, that's basically what this is. But okay, let's start at the ground floor and just talk about weird things in the character sprites going from light world to dark world. So let's just talk about Chris first of all. I only have 3 sprites here. There are more sprites for Chris, obviously, because chapter 3 has a bunch of different costumes, like the rocker outfit, for example, and the little mafia outfit. But the only one that I really want to talk about is the cowboy outfit, other than the regular Dark World changes. So Chris is very interesting, because the weirdest part probably about Chris's design change from Light World to Dark World is that Chris's entire skin tone changes to from yellow to cyan, which is kind of crazy. I'm not sure I put a lot of stock into the theories that it's like, oh yeah, Chris actually died, and this is supposed to like represent, you know, Chris is a zombie or something. Not that it's impossible, but it could be something a lot simpler, I would say. I do think this is interesting, though, speaking on those other sprites. Perhaps it's just for design consistency's sake. But this little pink scarf or cape or muffler, whatever it ends up actually, whatever it actually is, because I think it's actually named in the game, but I can't remember right now. This reddish pink scarf continues to every one of Chris's sprite redesigns, and you can even see in the concept art it's much more red than pink, which is interesting, and we'll get back to that. The cowboy outfit, the reason why I wanted to talk about it is in tandem with Susie's cowboy outfit, which we'll get to in a second. But interestingly, it seems like, especially considering the concept art here, Chris gains a yellow heart belt, which obviously we know the yellow heart as the justice soul, which is very interesting. I kind of used this as part of my predictions for Chapter 3, in saying that because Susie normally in her Dark World design has this yellow soul belt, but it changes to a star. I guess we'll just talk about Susie's star right now. It's something to do with like Susie in the first chapter with the Justice Soul belt was kind of like the bad guy, quote unquote. And so now in this sort of cowboy section, Susie gets a star, in other words, like turns into a sheriff, and now Chris has this justice heart. So does that mean Chris is playing the role of an outlaw? It would be very interesting if they were pitted against each other during this chapter a bunch, and it led into some of the themes. Anyway, so yeah, the big thing about Chris with the Dark World design is that they completely changed skin tone, which does not happen for any other characters from Light World to Dark World. Like, for example, Susie, where, okay, the color is different, but it's the same, like, color genre. It's not how you would say that, but whatever. Like, it's still purplish pink, you know? Susie's overall design isn't that interesting, I don't think. The star belt and the Justice Heart belt are probably the most interesting things about her Dark World design compared to her Light World design. Because what does that mean? Like, surely this is done intentionally, right? I mean, especially the star belt, which, like, okay, look at this. It's very interesting in the concept art. It looks like the star belt was, like, hastily pasted on afterwards. Like, it does not look like it was put there originally, although, you know, some of the coloring is rough. It is kind of weird that it doesn't have an outline or anything. Like, it's trying to cover something up, I guess. Like, there was they originally were going to put the yellow heart belt there, and then Toby was like, no, it's a star. You can see some black outlines, though, so there was a star belt, but, like, the color was adjusted or something? I don't know. That's conspiratorial for sure. But the Justice heart belt is very interesting to me, because it could point to Susie's role in the story being somewhat of, like, bringing somebody to justice. I don't know. Anyway, don't worry about all that stuff yet. We're just going to talk about Noelle's sprites and how they change. Noelle gets the least amount of changes, I would say. Her skin tone gets like a little bluer, and her outfit is just like a white sheet, because I guess she's a light mage or a ice mage, maybe. But really, there's not that much different to it. There's no special little things, so we'll leave that. Birdly, you can see the color, again, doesn't change very much. Goes from a sort of muted blue to a vibrant neon blue. But that's like it. Other than the crazy Fox McCloud outfit. I guess it would be Falco outfit. Let's be, fair. But yeah, that's basically it. There's not a lot to talk about there. Now, Ralsei has two designs as well. This isn't a Dark World design and then a Light World design. But a Chapter 1 design and a Chapter 2 design. Well, it'll be interesting to see if we get another design for Chapter 3, which could be possible, because if you look, on Ralsei's cloak, we go from a heart, very clearly, to a spade, which is very interesting to me, because when I played Chapter 1, I always read the black heart as saying, like, oh yeah, Ralsei's a Darkner, which means Ralsei doesn't have a soul. So we have Susie wearing a yellow soul on her design. Chris has no soul on their design. And then Ralsei has this empty slot soul on his design, which I definitely thought was intentional. And then it was changed into a spade in Chapter 2. And I thought I gaslit myself into thinking that was a heart and it was a spade the whole time. But no, it was a heart. So now the question becomes, if in Chapter 3 it turns into like a diamond or a club or something, then clearly it's just Ralsei is changing the symbol for some reason. But if it stays as a spade, then like, why? Because like, if we wanted it to be a spade the whole time, Toby could have retconned, like gone back and made it a spade, but didn't. So what's Ralsei? Why is that happening, Ralsei? Why is that happening? Okay, but now we're gonna get into the crazier part of the theory, which is all these aspects. So there is something interesting about how these colors kind of relate to the characters. And now, this is very easy to do. I've complained about this before with something like politics theory, right? Where in politics theory, we're basically just assigning a political methodology to the secret bosses because, it's a Rorschach test. You just see what you want to see. This is kind of like that as well. And while originally I was thinking like, okay, these colors that relate to their sort of Dark World colors for the characters are what they're like typified by, because obviously Ralsei, very kindness soul, that makes sense, is green. But interestingly, it almost seems like it's the opposite for the Lightners, which does make sense because the Dark Worlds are kind of like wish fulfillment fantasy, right? Specifically Noelle, and this one's kind of a stretch because she's not really orange, but she's like a very orange shade of brown, but it does fit with the whole, in the Light World, Noelle is very meek, and then in the Dark World, she learns to stand up to Queen. So that's giving her bravery she doesn't have in the Light World. Integrity with Birdly fits surprisingly well. Because integrity is all about like, being truthful, sticking to your code of ethics or whatever. And Birdly is very much not that kind of person. Birdly is trying to get ahead by any means necessary so people will care about him, right? For example, surely Birdley would know during the spelling bee that Noelle's sister December recently disappeared. But instead of, fessing up that that's an unfair question, Birdley's just been riding on that hype for years. You know what I mean? And Noelle is, he says this himself, that Noelle is basically the reason he does so well in school, and without her he'd be nothing. And yet he never, it seems like when they're alone, they're good friends, right? But he doesn't give her the credit, So it's a lacking of integrity, perhaps. Susie lacking perseverance, I'm not sure I totally believe. Because, all these other ones kind of make sense, but this one, it seems like Susie kind of has that nailed down. That's her big thing, is toughing things out. But then again, when you think about chapter 1 specifically, Susie is quick to snap at people. So maybe that is a manifestation of her not having the perseverance to, trust people. You know what I mean? Because perseverance is just essentially toughing things out and not giving up. And Susie is quick to try to give up on Lancer. It's really Lancer who has the perseverance that allows them to remain friends after that chapter. And it is kind of interesting. Also, Susie gives up her whole tough demeanor in this chapter too. So she's also not sticking it out with that. So maybe that works. But honestly, I kind of like the idea that Susie's... whereas these other characters are much more open with the things that they don't have and what they need. Susie's is kind of hidden. She's coated in this magenta, but the yellow soul is actually the big part of the design that's leading us into the what virtue or whatever she actually needs, which is justice. Either justice for what's going on in her life, which is probably not good, or the ability to protect people and seek justice instead of being the bad guy. You know what I mean? She is unfairly judged by everyone in Hometown, after all. That seems like it fits better to me. And then Chris not having patience in, because obviously Cyan would correlate to patience, the patient soul. Not having patience in the overworld, but having it in the dark world is kind of interesting, because every time we go to the light world, Chris is ripping the red soul out and doing what they want to do, right? But that has never happened in the dark world before. So maybe the dark world actually does give them some element of patience, which is kind of interesting. But I do have the red soul also with Ralsei and Chris, and this is throwing it back to my most insane theory, which is that Ralsei is Chris because the red soul doesn't belong to Chris, which means that Chris is technically soulless. So the Chris that we have in the dark world, the Lightner Chris, is actually based off of the red soul, while the Ralsei that we see in the dark worlds is actually based off of Chris's soulless body. So everything people think about Chris, in the same way a lot of the Darkners are based off of everything people think about a certain object, which is then Ralsei. So it would make sense that they would both have this element of freedom to them, because they're both related to this red soul. And they do, interestingly, both have these pinkish red scarves, which is something I've never noticed before. Chris obviously lacking freedom makes perfect sense. The reason why I have red as freedom is based on a video I made a while ago, talking about determination in Deltarune, and how the red soul is never specifically stated to be determination. So it really seems like with the themes the game is pushing so far, that potentially the red soul could relate to freedom. Because Spampton is all about trying to earn his place back in the world after being unfairly sort of sidelined. So, seeking justice. Whereas Jevil is all about sort of breaking the bounds that keep all the other NPCs in line. I mean, Jevil is all about freedom. That's really just his big thing. So it is interesting. Seems how Jevil uses the red soul in his fight and Spamton uses the yellow soul in his fight. Maybe it means freedom. And in that case, it would make sense for Chris to lack freedom. Ralsei lacking freedom would be an interesting thing to sort of go along with this, though. Because what does that mean? Like, does Ralsei lack freedom because Ralsei is inherently based off of a light world object and therefore cannot choose who he is? Or maybe Ralsei is missing freedom because Ralsei is bound to follow this prophecy that probably will lead to, the end of the world. Yeah, there's a lot to go off of. But it is interesting. Maybe if freedom doesn't specifically relate to Chris and Ralsei, as instead relating to a different character. Because I think it could be possible if this is some sort of... This actually means something, for one. But this is a fake-out where Susie actually isn't Perseverance, is instead Justice. That Caddy could obviously be Perseverance, because Caddy, with an I, the classmate, has a lot of sort of this purple color to her already. And that could be interesting. And then obviously Jockington is green, so Jockington could be kindness as well, because Ralsei's not a lightener after all. Which would then leave red for some other character. And interestingly, in the sweepstakes, this guitar, which is related to Des, because the song's name is Find Her, and it plays Lost Girl, which we already associate with Des because of the cutscene during Chapter 2, where Noelle talks about Des. It's called a bright red guitar. Now, it doesn't look very red to me. It looks more orange, which is interesting. If Noelle is related to orange, this is like a mix between red and orange if it's Des. But it could be interesting if Des is like this missing link and she actually has something to do with the red soul. So yeah, that's the video for today. Just some fun, wild speculation I wanted to get out there before Chapter 3 comes out. Chapter 3 and 4, I should say. Let me know what you think of this. I'm sure I'm not the first person to sort of put all this together before, because it's based on a thing you see with your eyes immediately. But maybe you didn't know about Ralsei's shirt emblem changing, because when I played through Chapter 2, people in the stream chat did not know that. And maybe you didn't know about the cowboy belt symbols potentially having some sort of symbolism to them. So yeah, let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching. There'll be more Deltarune coming up soon. Okay, bye!